In 6.3, we're going to do the converse of what we did in the last lesson. So in this case, we are going to have a quadrilateral, and we're going to look for those properties to say that that quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Instead of the other way around, where we had the parallelogram first and then showed the properties. So the first one is saying that we have a quadrilateral and both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Both pairs. Okay, and the other one, likewise, is the angles. So if both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, then we can say we have a parallelogram. So looking at this first example, I want to look at opposite sides and see if they are congruent. So in this case, my blue pair and my purple pair are not congruent. So no, and the reason would be opposite sides not congruent. Likewise with the angles. I want to look at opposite angles and see if they are congruent. So my purple angles are congruent, my blue angles are congruent. So yes, this would be a parallelogram. And the reason would be opposite angles are congruent. So we're going to try these. Again, mark your opposites. Check to see that both pairs are congruent. And these are opposite sides. Angles, you're going to do the same thing, looking for opposite angles congruent. So both the green and yellow need to be congruent to each other, and this would be no. And this would be opposite angles not congruent. In the next example, it's better to draw a picture. We have this quadrilateral, WXYZ. It says that WX is 15, YZ is 20, XY is 15, and ZW is 20. So marking out my opposites, looking for the yellows to be congruent and the purples to be congruent, and they are not. So opposite sides, not congruent, not a parallelogram. When we go to the consecutive angles, it's best to look for my opposites to be congruent, and then I need them to equal 180 both vertically and horizontally. So it's very easy if you don't have that first set congruent to say no. So we're going to look at this first one. I have opposites are congruent. So I need to look and see 95 plus 85 is 180. So it will equal 180 in both directions. So yes. And this would be consecutive angles supplementary, or angle U is supplementary to V and T. So I look here, the next one, I can see that my purple are not congruent, so it doesn't matter if they add up to 180 or not. This would be consecutive angles not supplementary. And in the next one, I don't have a pair of opposite angles even given. So this would be no, not enough information. And the last thing is, remember we talked about diagonals. So the diagonals must bisect each other. So we must have congruent segments within the purple and congruent segments within the green. So you look at your two diagonals. Do you have congruent segments within the green? Do you have congruent within the purple? Yes, you do. And the diagonals bisect. Diagonal SQ, diagonal PR. Do you have congruent segments within each of the diagonals? No. So the diagonals don't bisect. So we have 4 to try. 4 to try. With the angles, I'm looking for the opposites to be congruent. So this would be no. Consecutive angles, not supplementary. So there they are congruent. And then I need to test. So this would be a yes. And we have consecutive angles supplementary. Then we test our diagonals. Looking for congruency within the green and congruency within the purple. We do have that. And the last one, within the green, within the purple, and we don't have congruency, so the diagonals don't bisect. There's a summary of what we need to have in order to show a quadrilateral as a parallelogram. And what is the difference? Well, a quad is just a four-sided polygon, whereas a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. And we'll just list the basics with opposite sides congruent, with opposite angles congruent. And the assignment follows.